Today we're going to show you how to turn this into this. Hey everybody, I'm Jonathan and this is Damaged Darts, where we specialize in converting ordinary Nerf blasters into extraordinary prop blasters from popular video games and movies, and show you how you can do it too. If you like what you see on this channel, won't you be so kind as to smash that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, leave a thumbs up like, and a positive comment below. Today we're going to show you how to turn a stock Nerf Star Wars Chewbacca Bowcaster into this. So let's get started. Okay, so we're going to start on the modifications of the Nerf Chewbacca Bowcaster, and I'm going to first take off this the bow on the front. Now I already pre-did this. Basically all you've got to do is carefully grip here and here equally on the bow so you don't break any of the plastic, and just give it a firm press and it will come loose. So I'm going to take this off first because we're going to be working on the insides first. So now I'm also going to take off the little ammo clip there. And I'm going to take my screwdriver and undo this and take a look inside. Alright, so I've loosened up the screws here. Yeah, I did have a little piece of plastic break off on this clip, but fortunately it'll still get a good snap and purchase in there. So I would recommend, before you put on the bow portion, to do this internal modification first, and then our second modification of course is going to be adding more tension to this bowstring. So let's go ahead and open this up. Alright, and it kind of plopped out already for us. This is the piece we're going to need to remove. We do not need this right here. All we're needing is on the reverse side. I'm going to end up dumping the screws when I show you guys. Actually no, we're going to be keeping that post. That's really all we need here to hold that the dart in place. So we're going to keep that, but we are going to be removing this little spring mechanism here. We don't need that. So that's pretty much it for the internal modifications, and so we're going to get this back together and work on the bowstring. Alright, so we got everything screwed together here. We're going to set that aside and work on the bow. So what we're going to need to do is only open one half of this little knob here. Put it open like so. And that's what it looks like there. It just goes in through here, wraps around, and then it has a knot on the end to create the tension. So we're just going to slide that out. What we're going to do is we're going to bring it in about 1 inch on one side to create a little bit of extra tension in that string. That's about right. And we'll put it right back in. And it goes through that little hole. You'll see that little hole right there. That's the shape of the string. And it goes to the right, around counterclockwise, and then locks in between that little post right there, and then just put in the extra slack and we'll put it back on. Everything in alignment first. I need to get my screwdriver here and push in that extra just a bit. Get that out of the way. And put the screw back in. There, now it was a little slack. Now we get a lot more tension in that string. I've done this before also, and I put a little. I tightened this side as well, but it was too much tension. What tends to happen is if you give it too much tension, it just whips so fast that it basically just flings the underside of the dart, and it's a very poor performance. So you just want to give it the best you can do on this is give it a little bit of tension, and then that should still have a nice even purchase on the back end of the dart when it's flinging it out of the barrel area. So we've got that. We're going to click this back in. Make sure the string is over the top. Back in. And it's a good press fit Boom. We got that click, it's nice and firm, and we're set to try it out. So that is the modification on the Nerf Star Wars Chewbacca Bowcaster. Alright, so we're going to start on the cosmetic mods on this bowcaster. So first off, of course, I'm going to take this clip off. Probably paint that black, but I'm not going to put that on there as part of the mod there. We just really need this and the stock. Now the stock, I'm going to be mixing together some bondo and filling in all of this and then doing a sanding, so basically a full body rework so that it matches the other side and looks solid all the way through. So that's going to do that. I'm going to do that a little later, but right now, I'll take that off and we're going to grind off the Star Wars logo, the other Star Wars logo here, these little labels. I'm going to go ahead and do a sanding of that and then go over this whole thing with some steel wool to prep it for the gray primer that we're going to start with. Okay, I've got most of it sanded off here, but a little trick I'm going to show you guys that I accidentally came across while I was working on another project. So I'm going to wipe this off first with a damp cloth, just to get rid of some of the dust. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to get some acetone. I'm going to brush over the areas here. What'll happen is it'll melt the ASB plastic that this is made up of just slightly, and then I'm going to go back over it again with the steel wool and just kind of do that process back and forth. And what it'll do is it'll kind of smooth out those surfaces a little bit better where it's a little scratched from the sanding. It'll blend that a lot better. So I'm going to take a cotton ball, toilet paper, any kind of a little paintbrush even, just a little acetone on it, and then I'm going to go over these spots with acetone. Really, it starts to kind of get a little gummy, and it'll turn really shiny, get a little glossy look to it as it's melting the ABS. You can see some of the orange coming off on that, and get a little bit more here. So I can get a lot on this edge, and it's okay to wet it down quite a bit and let that melting activation happen. Be careful though when if you're using toilet paper or something like that, you don't want to get all the fuzz, as I've done a little bit right here. But again, I'm going to be going over this with some steel wool, and that's going to scrub this stuff off. Anyway, so yeah, so just go over it with a little bit of acetone, and then with a fine grit sandpaper, or rather steel wool, and just go back and forth until you get a nice smooth look to the inside of those shapes, and not as much of the sanding scratches. Alright, done with the acetone. It worked out great. I just ended up going back and forth, putting some acetone on the cloth and basically brushing it over the edges, and it softened the plastic just so that I could basically smear the plastic here and blend everything in, basically smudge it to fill in all of those streaks from the sanding. Then after everything, the acetone evaporated and dried, I just took the steel wool and went back over that to just buff it all down, as I'm going to be doing with the rest of this, to prep it for a nice bite for the primer. So I'm going to take off the bow here, unscrew this and undo all the clamshell, take out the internals and get it prepped for the painting. And when I do that, again, I recommend, well, I always say it's a must to take a picture with your cell phone or a camera once this thing is open, so you have a reference picture of putting everything back together when you've done all the painting. So I'm going to do that next and be right back. Alright, after tediously sanding with the steel wool, I have everything buffed down and ready for priming. Now on this particular area, you'll see these little tabs here. You can grab a flathead screwdriver or just your thumb if you want. Just kind of very carefully and sequentially pry from here to here to here to here and pull up. You might even need to get a little bit of a flathead screwdriver to wedge up underneath here, but the two pieces will come apart. And I've got that one here, that one here, and what I'm going to do is I've got some flat black primer paint combo, and I'm not going to prime these gray parts. I am going to set those aside and just use the flat black on those. However, on these parts, I am going to hit those with some flat dark gray primer, and then I'm going to work on the weathering with a toothpaste process that gives it a chipped paint look, actually, before we add the coat of flat black. Now, I'm going to, before I start painting, I'm going to be doing some body work on this stock piece. I'm going to use some bondo mixture and fill in this part of the molding and sand it down so I get an even look like the other side here. And I'm going to do the same on the back side of this front end of the barrel. I'm going to fill this part of the molding in with some bondo so it looks nice and solid when it's together. So I'm going to mix some of that up and prep that next before we do the next phase of the priming for all of the parts. Alright, I'm going to start the bondo filler process here. I've got my bondo, and it says to take about a golf ball size of the epoxy and a pea size of the hardener. I'm going to be, as I've read up on it, about a pea size to a pea and a half, because the more you put of the hardener, the faster it'll set. So I'm going to probably put about 2 pea sizes. I want it to set fairly quickly into more of a putty base to really mush that into here and to here to fill in that molding. So let's open up the can. All right. Whew, that's some strong stuff. It's already more of a cream base, it looks like. And I'm gonna give it a little bit of a stir. I've had this for a while. So it says a golf ball size of this to a pea size of the hardener. Alright, it's probably fine like that. Got an old spackling spatula on hand to use if I need to. So I'm going to go ahead and dump in about a golf ball round worth of the hardener, or the cream rather, cream base here. And yes, definitely put work in a well ventilated area because this stuff is potent. Wow. And I am. Alright, so that looks about like a golf ball size. I'm going to probably need quite a bit of this to mush into that stock end. So I'm going to go about a golf ball and a half. And scrape things off. Alright. And then we'll take the hardener, and it says a pea to pea and a half. Oops, well, it's like a, probably shake it up a little bit. Things have settled a bit. Okay, now let's see what we got here. Okay, so a pea, let's go 2 peas. It's probably looks pretty good there. Let's stir that up. It's starting to kind of turn a light pinkish color. And I'm just going to fill these spaces in and let it set overnight and cure. and then do all the sanding on it afterwards. It's kind of getting like a uniform brownish color, so from the gray to a brownish color, because that hardener is a red tone. Okay, that looks pretty good there. And now I'm just going to use my spatula, just dab this stuff in here. Alright, so I got everything finally done with the primer. Took me a little bit of work here, but I've got the filler done here with the bondo. That turned out great, and I've got the primer ready to go. So what I'm going to be working on next is the distressed chipped paint look, and how I'm going to do that. I've got a cup here with a little bit of toothpaste in here, watered down just slightly with a few drops of water, stirred it up with a toothpick, and I'm just going to apply this to areas with my finger. And what this is going to do is serve as a barrier, so then when I put the flat black paint on and let that dry, I can take a damp cloth and just wipe away the areas with the toothpaste, and voila, you've got yourself a really cool chipped look to it. And I've got some photos online for reference, so I'm going to kind of follow along those pictures and apply the toothpaste to this to create that distressed look. Okay, I got all of the toothpaste on. These are ready to take outside, and I'm going to give it a coat or two of the flat black paint. Alright, so now I've got everything painted. I've got a damp cloth here that I'm going to be rubbing off all of the toothpaste to reveal the chipped paint. Alright, so everything turned out great, and as you can see, there's a ton of chipping on this. This is what it looks like when you add the toothpaste liberally to your Nerf gun. So if you want a lot of chips, you know, slather that stuff on. If you want a little bit of chipping, then you just take the tip of your finger and lightly brush, because what happens is when you put that on, you paint it, and then you rub it off, well, some of the paint around that area that you put the toothpaste on will rub off, so you get a little bit more than chipping than what the actual toothpaste you rub on covers. So with that, if you want a little bit of chipping, just lightly brush little areas. If you want a lot, slather it on, and this is what you get. And as is in the photo of the actual prop, there's a lot of chipping on it. However, as you can see, there's quite a bit of contrast between the black and the gray. Now this paint, I've got to tell you, was a paint primer combo. So there's about a 10,000th, I don't know, 6 to 10 thousandths thickness right here of the black paint, and that's good. That's what I want to kind of get that powder coated, chipped powder coat look to it. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back and use just a satin black paint, not primer combo, but just a satin black paint to lightly go over this. And what that will do is it will darken these gray areas a bit more. And because it's satin, I wanted a little bit of shine to it, as it shows in the photo. So that satin will allow it a little bit of shine, and it will darken these gray areas for more of a chipped, more mottled look, as is shown on the photo of the prop. So I'm going to take that back out to the cardboard and hit it with a thin layer of satin black. Alright, so I added one thin coat of the satin black, and it turned out great. So now we've just got a very slight, you can see there, the chip paint, and so that gray area is very much more darkened, so you get that nice mottled look that you would see in that prop photo. What I also noticed though is that there was a bit of oxidization, aka rust, all over the whole thing. So what I'm going to do, as we've done, is a technique called just an acrylic wash, kind of creating a grunging effect. In some of our other blasters, we've used this technique to put kind of a darker oil grunge. So I've had lighter color blasters, and then we mix in some umber and black watered down, brush it over the whole thing, and then do a wipe down with a paper towel, and then what's left over we leave on there. It has that nice realistic looking oil grunged look. I'm going to use that same process, but I'm going to use this rust colored acrylic watered down and just lightly brush over everything and do a quick wipe down to kind of give it an oxidized look all over. And then I'm going to take a little bit of just maybe slightly watered down or just straight acrylic, and there's a couple spots that has some heavy rusting on it from what the pictures show, and I'm going to paint that into those areas. So that's what we're going to do next. Alright, so I am so pleased with the way this turned out. I thought I was going to use some thicker acrylic and go over certain spots, but after I did the wash, I think the rust just turned out perfectly. So that's really all I ended up needing to do, was just do a watered down rust color acrylic brush over, and then a wipe down, and just leave in pockets some heavier rust there, and then where I wanted it lighter, I would just wipe it down better. So that turned out great. Now what I also noticed is in these little dial sections here, there was some silver banding on these circles. So what I'm going to do next is use the photo for reference again, and I'm going to take this silver Sharpie marker and go over these with that. Alright, so here's the banding with that Sharpie marker. Just a slight detail, but I think it makes all the difference when you see the photo of the prop online. So I've got the little banding, just again, the silver Sharpie marker just went around those areas looking at the photo for reference. So now all I've got to do is take all these pieces and coat them in a coat or two of satin clear sealer to seal things up and get this thing back together. Got everything ready to go here. Here's what the internals look like. This is basically all you're going to need after all the modifications. Again, if you notice some things here in this picture that you still have, take those out. All you need on this side of the clamshell is this piece with the post that the dart goes on. On the flip side, you will be needing the trigger, this whole trigger mechanism setting as shown. Of course, I removed the screw back here to take the trigger off to do the painting, and I taped this area off so it wasn't gummed up with paint, and then screwed it back on. It's one of those little washer screws on the flip side there to hold it together, and then just dropped it back in. So that's what it looks like on this side and this side. Those are the two pieces you need. And now I'm just going to click everything back together and then slide the bow in place and install the bowstring. Alright everybody, here it is in all its finished glory, a little overview of what we did to it. We modified the internals, tightened up the bowstring about 1 inch off to one side for better tension and better firepower. Then we took the Dremel and ground off all of the Nerf and other labeling. After that we used a tricky little technique using acetone to soften up those areas. Then we did some bondo filler on the stock and the front end of the barrel. After that, sanding everything down with a hand sander and thoroughly going over it with some steel wool. Then cleaning off all the dust, giving it a rinse and a dry, hitting it with 2 coats of dark gray primer. After that, we used the toothpaste technique for the chip paint look. Then hit it with 2 coats of the flat black primer paint combo. And after that, the results were a little high in the contrast between the flat black and the dark gray primer, so we hit it with just a can of regular paint, satin black, to darken up the chipped areas. After that, we hit it with a acrylic wash of rust acrylic paint, then dabbing off most and wiping off most of the areas, but leaving an overall oxidized tinge to it, and some heavier spots of rusting in all the nooks and crannies. Then to finish it off, we actually went over it a bit here before I forget with the silver Sharpie marker on either side for that banding, reminiscent of the movie prop. Then we went over it with a clear sealer to finish it off. So all we have left now is to try this thing out. Alright everybody, hope you enjoyed watching that tutorial of how to turn a stock Nerf Star Wars Chewbacca Bowcaster into this replica prop. We hope you give it a try, and if anybody asks you, hey, where'd you make that? Just send them on over to Damaged Darts and they can make one too. If you haven't subscribed to our channel already, just click the double D icon below. You'll help us create more cool content for your enjoyment and inspiration. Until next time, I'm Jonathan, and this is Damaged Darts.